guys, welcome back to SS Multimedia. My name is Naman Patil and I'm going to be teaching a lesson today. So, today we're going to be learning all about multiplying by the powers of 10. Speaking of the powers of 10, let's look at the objective. The objective is to understand and learn how to multiply using the powers of 10. The keywords here are multiply and powers of 10 and using. So basically we're doing multiplication using the powers of 10. Okay? So now I'm going to show you what the powers of 10 are. So this is a normal 10, this is a normal 100, and this is a normal 1000. Okay? But there's an easier way to write all of these numbers. Or at least when you're writing down the powers, you guys will see. Just a second. Okay, so 10 can be written down as 10 to the power of 1, and that is equal to, or that is also can also be written like this: 10, just 10. Yeah, you can't really multiply anything to get to the, or 10 times 1 times 1. Okay, so now let's move on to the 100. So this can be written like this, so 10 times 10. Okay, so 10 times 10 is 100, but when you're writing an equation you don't want to write all of this, so there is an easier way to write down 10 times 10, or 100. It's just 10 to the power of 2. To the power of 2 is basically 10 and 2 with the small 2 on top of it. It's right here. And that 2 means that 10 multiplies by itself twice, so 10 times 10, which is basically what we wrote here, and that is also equal to 100. Now we're going to see 1000. So 1000 can also be written as 10 times 10 times 10. Okay, so you see how long that took? This is not the fastest way to write 1000. Okay, so that's why there's an easier way to write it again. So the easier way to write it is 10 to the power of 3. 10 to the power of 3 is basically 10 with a small tiny little 3 on top of it. So again, 10 to the power of 3 looks like this, and the 3 means 10 multiplies by itself 3 times, which is basically what we did over here. And that 10 multiplied by itself 3 times is equal to 1000. So it's basically an easier way to write down either this, say this is an easier way to write down 10 times 10 times 10, or 1000. Okay, so now now that we know what those little numbers at the top mean, let's practice a bit. So let's start off with 7 times 10. You should know that 7 times 10 is 70, but what you want to know is how that happens. So, and the pattern to it too. So let's just write down 70. Okay, and we'll continue, and then we're going to try to figure out the pattern later. So now we're going to figure out 9 times 10 to the power of 3. Okay, so we learned in the last page that 10 to the power of 3 is right here, and that is equal to 10 times 10 times 10, which is equal to 1000. Okay, so now that we know 10 to the power of 3 is 1000, we know that the equation is basically saying 9 times 1000, which you all should know is 9000. Just write that down. Okay, so that's 9000. Now let's move on to the next problem. 45 times 10 to the power of 2. Let's go back to the last page again, and let's see where we found that power of 2. Okay, so the power of 2 is right here, which is equal to 10 times 10, which is equal to 100. So, we know that 10 to the power of 2 is 100, so that means this equation is basically asking 45 times 100, which is 4,500. But the powers of 10 is not the only thing I want you to notice here. The other thing I want you to notice is the way the numbers change. So look at the pattern of zeros here. We see that when you multiply it by only 10, when you multiply any number, in this case 7, by 10, that 1 changes into a 7, and then you just add a 0. So you bring the 7 into the tens place, and you just add a 0 at the end because it's only by 10, and then you get the correct answer. Same thing happens to the next problem. You're multiplying 9 by 1000, or 10 to the power of 3. And 1000 has 3 zeros, right? And all we had to do was stick the 9 in the front and just attach 3 little zeros right after. Not little, but like just zeros. 3 zeros right after the 9 to get the answer. Same thing happened here too. When you're multiplying by 10 to the power of 2, 45 times 100. So all you have to do is stick that 45 right here and attach 2 zeros at the end because 100 had 2 zeros to it. So now, keeping that in mind, let's move on to the next problem. The next problem is 99 times 10 to the power of 1. We saw in the first problem that I had just written down 10, but now it's 10 to the power of 1. Let's look back to that last page. So we see that 10 is equal to 10 to the power of 1. So you could either write 10 as 10, or if you want to, you could write 10 to the power of 1. But I find 10 easier so that you don't confuse your multiplication. Just excuse me for a second. Okay, I'm back. So, we have basically 99 times 10. So remember, we can just stick that 99 in the front here, right? Okay, and then since 10 only has 1 0, just stick that 0 right at the end. And we have the correct answer, 999. You could check this answer if you wanted to, but it looks pretty correct to me. So, let's move on to the next problem then. 324 times 10 to the power of 3. Again, 10 to the power of 3 is 1000. So, we know that it's asking 324 times 1000. So, let's just put the 324 right here. And count how many zeros we have in 1000. So in 1000 we have 3 zeros. So then now we can just add 3 zeros at the end of 325 to make it the correct answer. Okay, so now we're just going to continue the same procedure for the next 3. Okay, so now 679 times 10 to the power of 3. So let's just write 679 here. 679, sorry, not the neatest, 679. And then let's just draw 3 zeros at the end to represent the thousands. So the answer is 679,000. So now let's move on to the next one. Now we have a 4-digit number. 1,234 times 10 to the power of 2. 10 to the power of 2 is 100. So let's just write 1, 2, 3, 4, which is 1,234. And then since the 10 has the 100 has 2 zeros. Let's just attach those 2 zeros to the end. And that's how we get our answer. 123,400. Now I'm going to show you another thing that you might have noticed. When you're multiplying with a whole number, this is the whole number, there's always a decimal point at the end of the number. So what happens to that decimal point when you're multiplying it by 100 in this case is, so it moves once and twice, 10, 100. So then that opens or shows 2 more zeros, which is what happened here. We got 2 extra zeros right here. So let me explain that with this one too. So 5,678 times 10 to the power of 3, which is 1,000. So let's write down 5,678. Okay, so we have that down here. So now we see that 1,000, right? So we have a decimal point right here. Okay, so then since we're multiplying by 1,000, let's move 1,000. So every time you move once, it's 10. So tens, hundreds, and thousands. Not really 10, it's 1 power of 10 every time you move. So tens, hundreds, thousands. So that when you're moving that decimal point, it makes 3 zeros pop out, which is going to give you your answer. The answer to this one is this. See, that's how I got the answer for this last problem. Okay, so now let me just make this area a bit neater so you can see the answers properly. Okay, I'll fix that later. Okay, now let me just fix it up. Put that 8 back. Okay, so that was the practice of multiplying the whole numbers. Since we multiplied whole numbers, we gotta give something to the decimals, don't we? So this whole page is about multiplying decimals with the powers of 10. So this is where that decimal point movement comes in handy. So we have 0.3 times 10, just a normal 10. So we know that the decimal point moves in the powers of 10. So we can move that decimal point once, which then comes behind the 3. So then you get an answer of 3. Because when you move that decimal point, it shows the 3 and the 0 has no value to it. So we're going to do the same thing to the next problem. So 0 and 45 hundredths times 10 to the power of 1. Again, remember 10 to the power of 1. Let's go back to the first page. 10 to the power of 1 is basically the same thing as 10, or 10 times 1. So, keeping that in mind, let's do this problem. So 0 and 45 hundredths times 10 to the power of 1, which is basically 10. So let's write that underneath, just to make sure that we know. So now we know that the decimal point moves in the powers of 10. So it only moves once here because 10 is only to the power of 1. So that shows the 4. So, and the 5 is behind. So then, since the decimal point moved like this, past the 4, it's 4 whole. The whole number is 4, and then it's in front of the 5. So then the 5 is a decimal number. So it's 4 and 5/10 as the answer. Now, doing the same thing and keeping the same thing in mind, let's do the next problem. 0 and 7/10 times 10 and 10 to the power of 2. So 10 to the power of 2. So 10 to the power of 2 we know is 100. Because 10 times 10 is 100, and that's what 10 to the power of 2 means. Okay, and we also have to keep in mind that the decimal point moves by the powers of 10. So that means if we had that 0, if we had that 0.7, the dot or the decimal point will move 10 tens, hundredths. So since it's hundredths, it moves 2, which then reveals a 0 that was supposedly behind the 7. So now that it reveals it, we know that the answer to our problem is 70. And behind that 0 is the decimal point, not another one, just the same one that was in front of the 7, but it moved to behind the 0, and behind that decimal point is infinite zeros. I did not draw a full 0, but it'll be fine. Okay, so now we have the answer to that. I'll just erase this stuff here. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the next problem. 0 and 98 hundredths times 10 to the power of 2. Now, the numbers are getting bigger. Okay, so now let's see. So again, this is 10 to the power of 2 is basically 100. We should know that by now. And 100, and the decimal point moves by the powers of 10. So 10, 100. So now the decimal point is behind the 8. So that reveals both the 9 and the 8. And remember, the 0 has no value to it, so it doesn't matter here. So now that the decimal point is behind the 8, that means 9 and 8 are both whole numbers now. And it's 98. Because the 9 is in the tens place, the 8 is in the ones place. Okay, so now we got that answer of 98. I hope I'm being clear with my explanation. If I'm not, please comment down below. Okay, so 0 and 9 tenths times 10 and 3 hundredths, or thousands, sorry. So we know that this are 10 and 10 to the power of 3, so sorry. So we know that this is 1000, 10 to the power of 3 is 1000, and we know that the decimal point moves by the powers of 10. So we can write down 0 and 9 tenths, and then we'll start moving the decimal point. So 10, 100, 1000. So each of these little dips is 1 0, which is what the point has uncovered now. So now we know that the answer we got is 900. Okay, so let's write that down, and now let's move on to the next problem. Okay, so now we have a pretty big decimal number. So it is 2,000, 0 and 2,349 10,000s times 10 to the power of 3. 10 to the power of 3 again is 1000. Okay, so, and we know that the decimal point moves by the powers of 10. So 2, 3, 4, 9. Okay, sorry, I was just reading out the number. Okay, so now we can start moving the decimal point. So remember, it's 1000. So 10, 100, 1000. Okay, so now the decimal point comes right here after the 4 but before the 9. So that means, let me write it like where you can easily see it. So 2, 3, 4, and there's a point 9. If you read out that number, it's 234 and 9 tenths. So that is our answer, 234 and 9 tenths. Perfect. Now let me just erase all of our work here. Again, you don't have to erase your work. I just want to because it looks much neater. Okay. So there we have it. That's how to multiply decimals by the powers of 10. Okay, so now So now it is your turn to show me what you've got. Okay, so take this time here, pause the video, and work out all of these problems by yourself. And make sure you have your answers ready, because I'm going to be checking them with you. Okay, let's pause the video now. Okay, so I hope you've got all your answers, and I hope you're ready, because I'm about to show you all the answers now. So we know 7 times 10 is 70, because it's pretty easy. Okay, we should know that 7 times 10 is 70. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. 0 and 7/10 times 10 to the power of 3. 10 to the power of 3 is 1000. So let's write down 0 and 7/10. And there's infinite zeros back here. Remember that. Okay, so now let's move the decimal point. Remember, the decimal point moves by the powers of 10. So 10, 100, 1000. So now the decimal point remains right here, which uncovers 7 and 2 zeros. And the 0 at the start doesn't matter. 7 and 2 zeros is 700. So that is our answer. 700. Okay, so now we have 9 times 10 to the power of 2. 10 to the power of 2 is 100. So we can just put the 9 at the start, and remember, 100 has 2 zeros. So 1, 2, 2 zeros. Okay, so we can just stick 2 zeros at the end of the 9, and you'll get your correct answer. So let me just make room for our next 3 problems. Okay. So now let's start doing the next 3 problems. 0 and 8/10 times 10. So we know that the decimal point moves by powers of 10, and 10 is 10. So let's move it by 10. So 10. So now the decimal point uncovers a 0 at the start and the 8. Remember, the 0 doesn't matter because it has no value. So this has an answer of 8. So again, the answer was 8 to this problem, so let's move on to the next problem. So 4 times 10 to the power of 2. So 10 to the power of 2, we should know, is 100. And to solve this, we can just put the 4 at the start, and then write down the 100. You don't have to do this, you should know how many zeros 100 has. And count the zeros. 1, 2, 2 zeros. So then we can add 2 zeros at the end. So now we know the answer is 400. Okay, and now let's look at this big number. So 0 and 34,567 hundred thousandths. So let me just write this number down. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, times 10 to the power of 3. We know that 10 to the power of 3 is 1000. So and we know that the decimal point moves by the powers of 10. So let's move it. So 10, 100, and 1000. So now the decimal point is right in front of the 6, and it's right behind the 5. So that uncovers 3, 4, 5, and that leaves us of a decimal of 67 hundredths. So the answer we have is 345 and 67 hundredths. Okay, so let me just erase all of our work here, just to make it more clear of what the answer is. I'll fix that 4. Just give me a second. Okay, so let me just fix the 4. Okay, so that is it for today. And just a reminder, make sure that you comment down below your score. If you got 1 out of 6, 2 out of 6, 3 out of 6, 4 out of 6, 5 out of 6, or 6 out of 6. 6 out of 6, you're doing really good. But remember to keep working. And I forgot to mention 0 out of 6. 0 out of 6 is perfectly fine. Just remember to keep working and you'll get that 6 out of 6. Okay, so now there's three more steps to complete if you want to see more of SS Multimedia and me. So those 3 steps are: number 1, like this video. The second step is make sure you share it to everyone you know. And the third step is hit that subscribe button. Well, that's it for now. Bye.